Welcome to another conversation on democracy from the campus of Washington Jefferson College. Our guest today is Serge Schmemann, Pulitzer Prize and Emmy-winning journalist and a member of the editorial board of the New York Times. Mr. Schmemann is on campus today as a part of Washington Jefferson's annual Symposium on Democracy. Serge, we're delighted to have you here at the college.
It's a privilege, a wonderful campus. Thank you.
Well, last evening you began your talk by quoting Thomas Jefferson, one of our namesakes, who said something along the lines of, if I had a choice between newspapers or government without newspapers or newspapers without government, I would choose the latter. And what were your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought was that not much more needs to be said. I think you put it in a nutshell. And, the terrible importance in any society and in how it's governed, how it's ruled, to have dispassionate, free information. It is really the lifeblood of most democracies, of any society. And I think one of the things that's been worrying us, one of the things that we discussed yesterday and at the symposium, is the erosion of press freedoms around the world. This is coming for many reasons. One is the rise of authoritarian governments, for which the free press has always been anathema. And the other is the total disruption of the economic and reporting model that we had for many, many decades, not only in the United States, but everywhere. It was the newspapers, radio stations, television stations drawing a large portion of their income from advertising. And of course, the internet, the web, has disrupted that model fairly solidly. The New York Times, at one point, the stock dropped from 57 to below $5, and there was the era in the early 2000s when we thought that newspapers, as we know them, will collapse. But I think that part will resolve. I think the more dangerous part, in my view, for the media has been the relativism that has come with the internet. The proliferation of blogs, of commentaries, of people who just felt free to talk about anything and everything, created a diffuse reality. You don't know who to trust. Which of these sites? Where do these people get their information? Much of it not based on reporting, just based on the feelings, opinions, prejudices, and much of it with an agenda. That might be an agenda of hatred, an agenda of prejudice. Basically, everything goes. And along with that, we've had the rise of misinformation, fake news. So it is a bad era right now for journalism, and a dangerous era for liberal democracy, because the role of the press is to keep people in power honest, and that role has become far more difficult, because you have people, leaders, who simply dismiss criticism as fake news, who dismiss the press as an ideological force. We have lost the authority that the press once had. We lost the notion that a major newspaper, a major news outlet, television station, radio station will first and foremost present you with dispassionate news, and that when they criticize, when they find corruption in power, that this will produce a reaction and anger and shame and will have consequences. All that has been eroded, I think, in this era, and is creating great problems.
I think probably no one in power likes to be questioned. It's not pleasant, but it's been our experience that a free press plays an important role in holding people accountable. And you mentioned that a free press has been an anathema to authoritarian governments, but in the recent report that's done annually by Freedom House on freedom of the press in the world, they noted that for the first time the last couple of years, they're seeing that one of the major contributors to the erosion of a free press is actually the actions and attitudes of leaders of democratic countries, not just authoritarian countries.
Yeah.
And you've alluded to that here, but the idea that a leader of a democratic country is perhaps undermining the authority and credibility of the press with the people who rely on it as a source.
Yeah. I mean, as you noted, I think people in authority have always had a certain antagonistic even relationship with the press, some very much so. That's natural. That's part of the dynamic. And it may have even reached certain dangerous levels before. Under Richard Nixon, there were active efforts to undermine reporters, to be selective in which reporters you spoke to, in trying to tap their phones. And yet, all that was below the surface, and on the surface, there was still this fundamental notion that this was wrong, that this is something he shouldn't have been doing, and in the end, he was actually brought down by a free press for all his misdeeds. So he was right to see it as an enemy. It was, in effect, the truth, and honest reporting was his enemy. I think the problem today, when we're being attacked by the government, is that there's no pushback. There's not enough public pushback. And part of that is, as I say, the notion that there's your truth and my truth. I mean, when President Trump's assistant or advisor, Kellyanne Conway, spoke about the press having alternative facts. I mean, that was right back to 1984, right back to Orwell, the notion that it all goes. I have a certain number of facts. There were this many people at my inauguration or whatever, and then you have your facts, and that each one is equally valid and each one has an ideological function. I think there's the danger that the basic consensus that I think we've had, even when the press was under attack in the past, the consensus that there is such a thing as factual, fair reporting, that is the part that is being eroded, I think, and that is creating this opening for people in power to attack the press.
So in a climate where this is the case, how do you advise citizens and perhaps even college students who are being prepared for responsible citizenship to discern among the sources of information available to sort of winnow out truth from fake news?
It's a tough one. The good fake news, the professional stuff, is really prepared well. There's a lot of talk now about getting some kind of regulation on the social media, finding some way to control this. It's very difficult because that runs up against freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Can you really bar somebody from telling lies? I mean, freedom of expression is the freedom to say things nobody wants to hear, maybe, so it's difficult to find out how to control it. But I think it gives me hope that after many years of this, people are beginning to develop instincts. There are ways to judge. We do know now which are the trustworthy sources of news, and some of the new ones have appeared online, like Politico. There are organizations that are out there, and they develop a reputation. It's not going to happen immediately. You can't immediately tell. But more and more news organizations, respectable news organizations, are discovering and disclosing the lies and revealing them. I think we at the Times do more now about looking at what's out there and what kind of lies are circulating. So, the public is reacting, and the respectable media is reacting. There is a certain reinvention of the basics of the wheel that's going on, and I think that gives me hope. We're getting used to it.
I think I share your optimism as one who works with college students every day and students who themselves are internet natives. I think they have actually become perhaps more sophisticated than some of us at understanding how to find sources of information that have authority, and we certainly see our students doing a good job of that here on the campus. So
I think you're right. I think at that age, I sometimes wonder, they seem to be very well informed, although I have no idea where they're getting their news, but they seem to be getting the right stories. So
well, they're getting some of it from the New York Times because we make it available free to all of our students here at W&J. But thank you for your insights. We've been talking with Serge Schmemann, editorial board member of the New York Times, who's on our campus for the Symposium on Democracy.